Hello and welcome to this Year 7 English seminar on grammar, Year 7 Grammar Giants. There are three key takeaways, three learning aims. Firstly, to understand auxiliary verbs and modal auxiliaries. Secondly, to show change using auxiliary verbs. And thirdly, using the passive and active. This is based around two imaginary assignments so that you can see how to use auxiliary verbs and modal verbs and active and passive. Is as if you were writing a story about a hero fighting a monster and a speech about beating bullying in schools. So first of all, let's think about verbs. What are verbs? Verbs are words that describe an action, a physical activity, or an active process. So to jump, to hug, to steal, which I hope you're definitely not doing, to climb or to swim are all verbs. But verbs also describe an internal state or an occurrence over time. So to be, to think, to feel, to grow, to belong, to know, to love, and to judge. We can't see people growing. We can't see people being. It's an internal state. It's an occurrence over time, and yet it's still a verb. So if we put to in front of a word and it makes sense, it's a verb. So to grab, to shake, to humiliate, to vaporize, to respect. We can see that these make sense with to in front of them and they're verbs. But to orange, that doesn't make sense. An orange that you eat is a noun. To elegantly, that doesn't make sense. Elegantly is an adverb. To beautiful, that doesn't make sense. Beautiful is an adjective. So we can see that if we put to in front of it, we can also identify it as a verb. The to form is the infinitive form. To destroy, to reject. They are infinitives. And so action verbs, these physical activities or active processes that we can see, are called dynamic verbs, and being verbs, the ones that are internal states or occurrences over time, are called stative verbs. Now, I wonder if you can identify if these are dynamic verbs, active processes, or stative verbs, internal processes or occurrences over time. So to cry, is that dynamic or stative? To consider, is that dynamic or stative? Is it an active process, a physical process that you can see, or is it an internal process, an occurrence over time? To scream, dynamic or stative? To decide, dynamic or stative? To punch, is that dynamic? Is that stative? And to knock, is that dynamic or is it stative? Well, I hope that you had these answers, that cry, scream, punch, and knock are dynamic, they're physical actions, and to consider and to decide are internal occurrences, and they're stative verbs. Now, the main verb is really important to understand before we think about auxiliary verbs. So you can see in these three sentences about the hero fighting the monster that the main verbs have been color-coded in red. So the hero attacked the beast. So attacked is the main verb. The hero stood strong. Stood is the main verb. And then the beast ran towards him. They're main verbs. What about these ones about this speech about fighting bullying in schools? Bullying is stoppable, is the main verb here. Victims need support. Need is the main verb. And then bullies feel pain too. Feel, stative, is the main verb. You can see those first three are in past tense and these three are in present tense. But if we were to change them to add subtle meanings, to explain how long or when, we would need helper verbs, we would need auxiliary verbs. So they would change, the sentences would change a little bit. So the hero had attacked the beast when, so we use the word had as an auxiliary or a helper verb. The hero had been standing strong until, so had been, we change it. We have the extra verbs, these auxiliary helper verbs, had and been. The beast was running towards him. So we're adding a verb here, was, and bullying must be stopped. We're adding an auxiliary, and victims will need support, explaining when they will be needing support, and bullies can feel pain. So these are helper verbs, these are auxiliary verbs. And you can see that auxiliary verbs or helper verbs, they help us understand when or how long something's happened. I will see you on Thursday, so that's in the future tense. I'd seen her every Thursday for 6 years. So that's telling us that's happened over the 6 years. Hopefully I'm seeing Pip on Thursday. I am seeing, so that kind of sense of something that's going to be ongoing. And then I have seen the film on several Thursdays in a row. So you can see that auxiliary verbs help us to understand about the past, the present, and the future. And the main ones that we use to change tenses are will, had, am, and have. Those are the main auxiliary verbs. But we also have mode participles. And you can see that the verb, the main verb, has changed to an ed verb or an ing verb. So with these sentences, I jump, I have jumped, I will jump, I am jumping, I was jumping, I had been jumping, I'm going to be jumping, I will be jumping. These use auxiliary verbs, have and will and am, but they also use participles, the ed form of to jump, jumped and jumping. We also have modal verbs. Now, modal verbs can be called shoulda, woulda, coulda verbs. I shoulda, I woulda, I coulda. They help us understand things that are possible, things that are permissible. They give advice, they give obligation, and they show what we can do. So you could say I help or I helped, but you could say I should help. I should help. It's that sense of something that's advisory. I would help. So that's something that could happen. I could help. That's a possibility. So modal verbs explain all these different kind of shades of meaning and whether something is possible or it needs to be done, necessary. So let's talk about modal verbs for ability, for our assignments. So he could defeat the beast, even with his injured wrist. You can see that modal verb is talking about ability. His ability hasn't been diminished despite his injured wrist. He could outrun the creature despite the bloodied ankle. So again, his ability hasn't been decreased. He could still outrun the beast. What about for non-fiction writing? We can stand together against bullying. It's possible. We can, as a school, destroy hatred and fear, and we can create strong children, unafraid to fight injustice. It's possible. So these modal verbs can show what we are able to do. Can. What about permission? Could, can, may. Can I come in? He screamed. May I ask you what you intend to do with the body of the dead beast? So it's the permission, this idea of asking. What about advice? Our hero should have looked carefully before jumping into the aquamarine lake. That would have been the advice. He should have done this. I should warn you, beating bullies takes courage. So that should is advisory. But then these are more to do with duty, to do with what is necessary, what is obligatory. You must find his weak spot, the fisherman told the hero. So it's an obligation. We all know that we have to tell someone when bullying occurs. So that sense of duty and obligation through that modal verb. Possibility is also expressed through modal verbs. The challenge could be impossible, but the hero was willing to take the risk. So what is possible? You might not feel that you can confide in anyone about bullying, but there is always help available. So you might not feel, it's possible that you don't feel as if you can confide in someone, you don't feel that you can tell someone. That is possible, but there is always help. There's that reassurance in this speech. So modal verbs help us to understand these shades of meaning, what we can do, what we are permitted to do, what we should do, what we must do, and what we could do. So modal verbs add that shade of meaning to different verbs. Modal, also we can see about past, present, and future, and these 12 different tenses exist in the English language. So these tell us what is past, what is present, but they also have these different shades that are something that is simple, something that is progressive, and something that is perfect. Something that is the kind of the simplest form, something that's kind of ongoing, and something that is perfect. Okay, so you've got simple present, you've got present progressive, and simple past. I play basketball every week. I'm playing basketball now. I played basketball. Past progressive, I was playing basketball the whole evening. Present perfect, I have just played basketball, so it's completely over. The present perfect progressive, I've been playing basketball for 3 hours. The past perfect, I played basketball before Mary came. The past perfect progressive, I've been playing basketball when Mary came, so that sense of interruption. The future, I will play basketball. Future, going to, and then the future progressive, I will be playing basketball next Sunday, and then the future perfect, I will have played basketball by tomorrow. So 12 different tenses in the English language. Really what we want to do is focus on the past, present, progressive. I had been playing basketball when Mary came. This is a really helpful tense to show interruption, to show change, and to show the previous past. So using the had been and replacing it with the was. So let's look at some sentences for fiction writing, some sentences for non-fiction. The hero was worried. He was traveling through the countryside. And then for fiction writing, Mike was a confident, sorry, non-fiction writing, Mike was a confident student. You can see they all use was, but if we change it, if we use the had been, we can show some kind of change, some kind of interruption, and the previous past. So for example, the hero had been worried, but the fisherman cheered him up. You can see there's a change. There's a change in his emotions. He had been worried, but now he feels cheered up because of the fisherman. So the had been really helps to show the change. He'd been driving in the countryside when he encountered the ferocious beast. He had been driving. So that shows an interruption that had been and then he met the ferocious beast. And then Mike had been a confident student before he was bullied. So you can see what had happened in the previous past. He had been a confident student before he was bullied. So this had or had been tense really shows the events that have changed, things that have been interrupted, and things that happened before the time that we're writing about. So can you see the hero had been winning the battle, but the beast fought back. You can see that there's been a change. He'd been winning, but then the beast was winning. He'd been finishing his breakfast when he received the news. So he'd been finishing his breakfast and then the news happened. It was interrupted. This had been shows an interruption. The monster had been in the village square before it arrived at the lake. So the previous past. So it's at the lake before, but before that, it had been in the village square. Disaster struck 4 years earlier when the hero's horse had been stolen. So we've got 4 years prior to what was happening in that past. So it's the previous past, so we're using had been. He had been crushed by bullying, but now he's standing strong. So in the non-fiction writing, you can see what had happened, but what is currently happening. So the previous past. Today was calm, but yesterday had been chaos. So you can see the had been is using this idea of a previous past. Russell had lived in Finland before moving to England. So this had is showing a change. And then last year we had been intimidated by bullies, but now we stand up to bullies together. We had been intimidated. So there's a change, there's an interruption, there's a previous past. So the 12 different tenses can be very confusing, but to remember that had and had been can show change, interruption, or previous past will really help you in your fiction and non-fiction writing. Okay, now for the last part of this webinar, I'd like us to talk about the active and the passive. So what does that mean? The active voice is what we normally use. We have the subject, the monster, and we have the hero, which is the subject, and the main verb. The monster attacked the hero. So that's what we normally say. But with a passive voice, we change it. We change the order. The hero was attacked by the monster. The hero was attacked by this vicious, terrifying, ferocious cat-like beast. So in the previous sentence, the hero was the subject, the main agent, the main person to be acting. Sorry. And now we've switched it around. The monster is. The hero was attacked by the monster, this ferocious, vicious, beast-like cat. Sometimes we don't even say who they were attacked by. The hero was attacked. That's the passive. So he wasn't doing the attacking. He was receiving the attacking. And we don't even tell us. It doesn't even tell us who he is being attacked by. So you're making that thing appear passive because they're not the agent. They're not the main person doing the verb. They are receiving the verb. They're not doing the attacking. The hero isn't attacking. He is being attacked. And so we can call it the passive. He's not doing the attacking. He's receiving the attacking. And when we take away who is actually attacking him, it makes it sound more formal, more distant, and perhaps even more helpless. So we can add the passive to add formality and to add a sense of hopelessness. Right, here are 4 more examples. The beast crushed the hero with his huge paws. If we changed it to the passive, the hero was crushed in the beast's huge paws. You can see the hero is passive, if you like. He's not doing the crushing. He is being crushed. He's receiving the crushing. And then in the brackets, you can see what is crushing him, the beast's huge paws. The hero chose his deadliest weapon. Again, in this fatal fight between good and evil, this epic battle, the hero is choosing his deadliest weapon. But if we change it to the passive, the deadliest weapon was chosen. So we can see that the weapon isn't doing the choosing, it's receiving the choosing. So that's why it's passive, if you like. And then in the brackets, who is doing the choosing? The hero. The deadliest weapon was chosen by the hero. Let's think about this in terms of non-fiction. Bullying creates fear in victims. You can see the bullying creates fear in victims. Fear is created. Fear is created in the victims. We've switched it around. We've made it sound even more passive. Fear is created in the victims by bullying. And we can see that the subject is at the end, is in brackets. It really intensifies how passive, if you like, how helpless these victims are. What about another non-fiction example? We can make a huge difference in the lives of many people. So this is non-fiction, this speech about bullying. A huge difference can be made in the lives of many people. A huge difference can be made. It's not telling us who is making the difference until the very end by us. So it's adding formality to the writing. A huge difference can be made in the lives of many people rather than we can make a huge difference. It's adding formality. It's taking away those pronouns we and us. And so it makes it sound much more formal. And that's the other use of the passive. So it can make things sound very helpless, but it can also make writing sound very formal. And that's why you use the passive voice. Can you change these sentences from active to passive? The fisherman found the clues. The monster broke the sword. The villagers witnessed the battle. Victor spread rumours all over the school. Head teachers can exclude bullies from school. Childline has recorded a decrease in bullying this year. So you can see the first three are fiction and the last three are non-fiction. Can you change them from active to passive? Well, hopefully your answers are something like this. Clues were found by the fishermen. You can see it's taken away what the agent, the main subject of that sentence. The sword was broken by the monster. Intensifies how helpless the hero is. The battle was witnessed by the villagers. Rumours were spread all over the school by bullies. Bullies can be excluded from school by head teachers, and a decrease in bullying has been recorded. All of those in red are in the passive. So they're making things sound more helpless and more hopeless, perhaps, or they're just adding an increasing formality to writing. So that is it. We have covered auxiliary verbs, we've covered modal auxiliaries, we've talked about participles, and we thought about had and had been. So here are the answers. What are auxiliary verbs? They're helper verbs. What are modal verbs? They show ability, permission, advice, obligation, and possibility. They're shoulda, coulda verbs. What are participles? Participles are the part of the verb that shows a change using ed and ing. What 3 times does it help to use had or had been? To show change, to show interruption, and to show a previous past. What is the active voice? A subject is the focus of the verb, and what is the passive? The object is the focus. Sometimes the agent is removed. This makes it seem more helpless, or makes it sound more formal. I hope that's helped you with your grammar. I hope you can become a grammar giant, and I hope this has helped. Thank you for watching.